Above and beyond the basics and learn a little bit more about the Rice County Attorney's Office this morning. John Fossum, Rice County Attorney, has agreed to be with us every month, and he's with us today. Of course, you were here a couple of weeks ago with the sheriff, right?
Right. Good morning, Gordy. Thanks
How
for
are
having
you
me down.
doing today?
I'm doing great.
I was just telling you before we hit the airwaves, I would hate to have your wardrobe bill.
Well, it doesn't come up that often, but every now and then I need to go get a new suit.
You know, because you wear suits every day, you were saying.
That's right. I never know when I need to go upstairs to the courtroom.
You don't get to have a blue jean day.
No, there's no casual Fridays in my office.
At all.
At all.
Yeah. So I thought we'd get educated on the county attorney's office because I think most people know that you prosecute, criminals, but do they know about the other things that you do?
Sure. Well, I think the best description that I have for the office came from one of my predecessors, Jeff Thompson, who was the county attorney when I came to Rice County to practice, and is now chief judge of the district over in Winona. But he said it's really 4 different jobs in one. That you have to be the elected official. So I have to, I go out and explain to people what we do and why we do it and what's going on in the office. That I'm the chief prosecutor for the area. That we prosecute all the felonies in Rice County. We prosecute a lot of the gross misdemeanors. We prosecute the misdemeanors and traffic cases that occur outside of the cities. Faribault, Northfield, Morristown, Lonsdale, Dundas all have their own city prosecutors, but we handle all the other things that happen outside. If the sheriff's office or the state troopers write a ticket outside that area. I am the corporation counsel for the county, so I'm responsible for providing all the legal advice to the county board and the county departments, and so we have that obligation to be up on civil law as well as criminal law. And I'm also a department head, so I run an office with 16 people in it. There's myself. I have 8 lawyers, 8 assistant county attorneys, and 7 support staff who work within that office. And so my obligation is to keep that all going and keep people moving forward.
This includes the victim witness unit?
Right. We have a victim witness coordinator who's one of our 7 support staff. So they have to keep in contact with the victims and the witnesses, keep people organized so that when we're going to trial, we're ready to go.
I don't know if some people realize that if there's a burglary in their house or something, you can file a claim with the reparations board, right?
Right. There is the Crime Victims Reparations Board up in the cities, and you can file a claim with them, and they will reimburse you and seek reimbursement from the defendant so that you don't have to wait for your restitution payment.
Do you get restitution on top of that, or do you have to pay that back, or how does that work?
Well, the restitution in that case, where you describe it, if the person gets paid by the Crime Victims Reparations Board, then they stand in the shoes of the person who got paid, and they collect the restitution from the defendant. So they're the ones waiting for years to get paid, as opposed to the person who was actually harmed.
Well, that's good.
Right. It's an excellent program. It's a great idea.
No, it hasn't been around that long, huh?
It's been around for a number of years, but I couldn't tell you exactly when they started.
Sure. How long have you been an attorney, John?
23 years now. Be 24 in the next couple of months.
Do you like the idea of electing our county attorney, or do you think the county board ought to be able to choose the county attorney?
Well, having won the election, I think the election is a pretty good idea.
Well, yeah, from that standpoint. But I mean, is it?
I think there's a lot of reasons for it to be an elected position. I know it's kind of a hangover, and a lot of people wonder why we have an elected county attorney, why we have an elected...
Well, the same's with the sheriff, yeah.
Yeah, sheriff, but I don't think elections are a bad thing. I think that shines a lot of light into what happens, and as an elected official, I have a lot more obligation to go out and explain myself to people than I would if I was an appointed official. Then I'd only have to explain myself to the county board. So I think that the election makes sense, and maybe more sense than it does for some other elected positions. But
so our forefathers were wise in that respect.
I would say so.
Okay. We're going to visit more with John Fossum. By the way, you can text. Well, I didn't bring my phone in here. You can text me a question at 507-838-5233. I will have my phone. I'll go get it during this market update. Service of your KDHL Agri-Boosters, including Ag Power Enterprises, your John Deere dealer in Owatonna, Hollandale, Belle Plaine. Osage knows what. Two-year average in the U of M Southern Minnesota soybean trials. For more information, go to the website prairiebrandseeds.com or call Prairie Brand Seed Dealer in the Faribault area, Milt Olson. John Fossum is with us. He is the Rice County attorney, and I guess I didn't get to your background, John. Here you, you're a native Minnesotan?
Yeah, I grew up in Northfield, so I've been around the area for a long time. My family's actually lived in Rice County for about 6 generations.
Wow.
I think my daughter's at least the 6th generation of Fossum, and there's other branches of the family that have been here maybe even a little bit longer than that. So I grew up in Northfield, went to college, went to McAllister College up in St. Paul, graduated from college and then went to law school, William Mitchell Law School in St. Paul, practiced in St. Paul for a couple of years, and then in about 1996 moved my practice down here to Northfield, and I was a part-time public defender in Rice, Steele, and Waseca County courts until about 2004. Had a firm with 2 other guys. So I was a part-time public defender for all those years, and had a firm with two partners, John Lundblad and Phil Zrimzik. About 2006, my wife got a job offer in Switzerland, and we decided to move to Switzerland. So I spent a year driving around the Alps in an Alfa Romeo with a 2-year-old, and then I needed a new job, so I took a job in Afghanistan, training police and prosecutors for a State Department contract, and my wife and daughter moved back to our house in Northfield, which someone had been renting from us. And 2008, when my contract ended in Afghanistan, I came back and opened up my own office and practiced solo practice for a couple of years, and in 2014 ran for county attorney and won, so now I have this new job.
So you went from public defender to prosecutor.
Yes.
Interesting. So you can kind of view it from the other side. Not all prosecutors come that route, right?
Right. A lot of people, only do one or the other, but frankly, I think what makes a good lawyer is the ability to see both sides and argue both sides and know what the other side is going to argue, so that you're prepared for it, so that you aren't surprised when somebody says, well, why didn't you think of that?
Right. More well-rounded the better.
Right.
And is that what you look for in attorneys that you hire for your office?
Yeah. In fact, when we hired a new lawyer in our office last year, she had done public defender work elsewhere and had a couple of years of practice, and so we were happy to have her, and I think she's doing a great job.
You know, it's changed a bit too. I moved here in 1987, the public defender's office.
Yeah.
I remember at the time, Jim Keating was one of the public defenders. I can't remember all the attorneys that were, and they were, trying to get a raise for
Right.
public defender work, because as you know, it's really tough to make a really good living being a public defender.
Well, and the public defender system, about that time, I think maybe the early 90s,
Yep.
went from a sort of county-based system to a district-based system, so that it was, instead of the judges in the county appointing, went to a system where there was a district public defender, and that district public defender, when I came down here as a part-time public defender, was seated in Winona and would administer the whole district. And then the state took over the district public defender system, so now they're all state employees, and instead of having kind of either part-time contracts where they get a flat fee, they get a salary for doing part-time work. But a majority of the public defenders are actually still part-time lawyers who have their own practices and do it part-time on a salary basis. So it's really, they are professional lawyers who are criminal law specialists. It's a majority of what they do, and they tend to do very good work.
Do you think it's a good system, though? I mean, should we have, maybe a county prosecutor, should we have county public defenders?
Well, I wouldn't want to be involved in picking my opposition, and I think that's a conflict. I don't think I should be able to decide who are the lawyers that go up against their office. So I much prefer that the state have that obligation, and they sponsor the training, they hire the lawyers. I think that makes more sense than having my office or even the courts directly involved in picking who the lawyers are.
Right. Now, you've probably been asked this a million times in your position now, or in your position when you were a public defender, I should say. If you are defending somebody that you know is guilty of a crime, and I know what the answer is probably going to be because I've asked this of other individuals who have been on that side of the court aisle, how difficult is that? I know that everybody deserves a right to have an attorney.
Well, I think the question, becomes not just what do you know or what do you think, because, what you're saying is, in your opinion, the person probably did it, and the question is, do you believe in the system? Do you believe in the Constitution? Do you believe in the requirement that the state has the obligation to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt with admissible, lawfully obtained evidence? And that is something I've always believed in, and something I still believe in as a prosecutor. And we don't pursue cases that, if we don't have proof beyond a reasonable doubt, if we don't have evidence that was lawfully obtained, we're not going to pursue the case. We want convictions we can defend. We want convictions we can live with. And as a defense attorney, it's your obligation to try and poke holes in the case, but it's also your obligation to be ethical and honest about it. And you can contest the admissibility of evidence. You can argue what the evidence means, but you aren't out there lying about it. And a big part of the obligation of the defense attorney is to get the best result they can for their client. So they may well be negotiating cases to try and get a resolution when they know that they don't have a great defense.
When you were public defender, was your first question, did you do it?
No. No. My first question would have been, tell me what happened.
Okay.
And, how did we get here? Because they have a better view of what happened than I do. And so we would talk about the case, we'd talk about the evidence, and we'd talk about, what are our options going forward? Are we going to try and negotiate a settlement? Was the search lawful? Is the evidence lawfully obtained? And so, those are all important parts of the discussion. But no, I didn't. That was not my first question.
Yeah. You've got the budget figures in front of you, and I thought it would be very interesting to go over some of that information, too, in the county attorney's office. Or no, I'm sorry, those are crimes that you have in front
well,
of you.
what I have here is information about the juvenile certification, because you asked me to talk about that. But I will tell you that our budget is roughly at $1.6 million a year. As we talked about earlier, we have 16 people on staff, so the majority of that is salaries and benefits, and the rest of it is just running the office. We have to bring witnesses in sometimes from elsewhere. We got to pay for occasionally travel expenses and training for my lawyers, and we have to buy. If we need a transcript of a hearing, we have to pay the court reporter for that. That's part of our budget. So we have a lot of things that go into it, but of course the majority is just paying for the people who do the work.
And they do hard work.
They do. They work hard. They're busy all the time, and my staff does a great job in keeping on top of things.
Yeah, I think it could wear on you after a while. Some of those cases are pretty tough.
They are. There's a lot of burnout in the practice of law on our side, as on the public defender side. There are things that we deal with that are just horrible, horrific, awful things, and we have cases where by the time it's all done, everybody involved winds up with a form of PTSD, or a lot of people do, because they've seen something horrible that they weren't prepared for, that they weren't expecting, And that's one of the things we try to work on in terms of minimizing it, is helping people avoid those issues. We don't like to, a lot of people talk about plea bargains as something we should avoid, but when we're dealing with cases, we want to protect our victims. We want to protect everybody involved in the case. And if we can resolve a case without our victim having to testify, but we still have the person under supervision, we still have the person accepting responsibility for the actions that they did, and we can avoid re-traumatizing our victim, that's something we have to take into consideration when we go forward with resolution of cases.
Right. That was going to be a topic in the future. I wanted to bring that up because a lot of people say we shouldn't have plea bargains.
Did I just blow another whole show for you?
No, that's quite all right. We can do a show on that sometime in the future. I'd be very curious, percentage of cases, how many are plea bargained out, that sort of thing. Maybe we could get some of those numbers.
Well, and I can tell you nationally, it's 90 to 95% of cases are resolved by plea bargains. Most people serving sentences are serving sentences on plea bargains. We don't try that many cases as a percentage of the cases that come before us, and so we get a huge percentage of resolutions that are done just by negotiation rather than trial.
Did your office have an increase in business, so to speak, in 2015? Do you have the final numbers in yet?
I don't have the final numbers in yet, and we're working on, one of the things we're working on changing is our case management system, because frankly we don't get reliable numbers out of the case management system that was there when I got there.
Okay.
So over the next 6 months we'll be transitioning to a new case management system. I will tell you that our child protection cases have gone up quite a bit over 2015, and I don't know if you remember, but there was a news story last year, or maybe the year before, out of up north, I think maybe it was Polk County or Pope County, I forget which one, where a 4-year-old kid was referred to child protection over and over again, and they never responded, and finally he was found dead and murdered by his stepmother, which led to a lot of changes in the child protection statutes in Minnesota, and the changes in the way those cases are reported, changes in the way they're investigated, and that has led to a very significant increase in our caseload of those child protection cases, and they've about doubled for our office. I think we've gone from 55 I believe it was 55 in 2014 to 100 in 2015. And we also have, as part of that, the cases where we seek termination of parental rights or a permanent placement of the children. And those cases have also have more than doubled in our office. We went from 9 in 2014 to 20 in 2015. So we're seeing more of those cases. They're more severe than they have been, and it's a tremendously sad situation. We have an obligation to look out for the best interests of the child. We do our best to reunify them with their parents if we can. What we're trying to do is get them the services that they need. Those cases are called CHIPS cases in the business, Child in Need of Protection or Services. And so first we start with protection. We look for what services we can bring to them, which is that's the responsibility of our Department of Social Services, to come up with the services and come up with a plan that can reunify those kids with their parents within 6 months or a year. And if we can't do that, then we have to look at termination or permanent placement, where the kids are going to go live somewhere else.
John Fossum is Rice County's attorney. When the county gets sued, I mean, it happens, you defend the county, or
Right.
Your office does that, or?
Right, our office does that. That's our obligation. That if people, we are the civil counsel for the county board. I went to a National District Attorneys Association meeting early back in June, and one of the things I found is that a lot of district attorneys and people are familiar with that term from television rather than county attorney.
Right.
People get confused as to what a county attorney is and what's a district attorney. And so I guess you could say I'm the district attorney for the county of Rice, but we also have those civil obligations. We are the civil counsel for the county board. And that's not something that you find in a lot of places. And I know I talk to a lot of lawyers at some of these National District Attorneys Association meetings and say, you have to do the civil work too. You have to do the child protection work too. How do you do all that? And it's so, you know, we have 50 different states. We have 50 different systems of how those services are brought and rendered, and some of them are done by appointed lawyers, some of them are done by elected lawyers. And so it just varies by state.
Another show that I'd like to get into more depth in the future is drug court, which was started not too long ago
Right.
here in Rice County.
And you know, the drug court I think is doing well, and be happy to get a lot more detail for you on it on another show. But I think our first graduate is probably going to happen in the next couple of weeks. Really looking forward to having that announcement and seeing that happen, because it's been really, I think, gratifying to see the way some of the people who've been in the drug court have been able to turn their lives around, and people that, you know, we might not have thought that they could. But given the motivation, given the opportunity, and given the support of the drug court, they've been able to kick their habit and really turn their lives around, whereas otherwise they'd just be rotting in prison.
And I don't know if that coincides with what the state legislature is talking about doing. Right? They were recently discussing lessening some of those sentences for drug crimes.
And I think that does coincide a little bit. I think one of the things about drug court is it requires a lot of people. It requires them to commit to the program and commit to seeing their way through it, and commit to a lot of tests, a lot of reporting, a lot of showing up for court, meeting with their probation officer, meeting with the drug court coordinator, meeting with treatment professionals. And some people would rather serve their sentence than do that. And so as we lower those potential sanctions, I think it's certainly possible we're going to see fewer people willing to put up with the stuff we make them put up with to be in drug court, because they're not necessarily looking at the kind of time. And the other thing I see from those guideline sentences is that when we're looking at the people who are first-time offenders but who have a lot of drugs in their possession, if we're not looking at significant jail sentences, prison sentences, you know, it's hard for us to come up with a reasonable resolution, and it's hard for us to say that we can do anything other than take that case to trial and prove it up, because but if what we're getting is a much lower prison sentence, which is what those proposed guidelines ask for, we're going to see a lot fewer people heading to prison because of drug offenses. Minnesota has never done the kind of thing that you've seen in federal court and a lot of other states, where we send just about everybody with drugs to prison for long prison sentences. We've always been a lot more rational. We've always had a lower percentage of our population in prison. And I think lowering the potential penalties for drug dealers is not necessarily going to help us in terms of public safety or reducing drug use.
Before I let you go, I did ask you to bring some information you did about petitioning juveniles into adult court. Is it a difficult process? Is there a certain age that you can't do it at? How does that work?
Well, in Minnesota we have a process where between the ages of 14 and 17, if a juvenile commits a felony offense that would be a presumptive commit to prison if they were an adult, then we can petition them into adult court for, in Minnesota we call it certification, so we certify them to stand trial as an adult. That process, it really depends. It's very dependent on the child. If they've got a long history of causing trouble, that's when we're more likely to do it, if they're, or if it's a very serious crime. Obviously, murder is a automatic certification. Other crimes that are presumptive commits to prison are what are called presumptive certification. We still have to go through a certification hearing, have a certification process, but it's our obligation to prove that they belong in adult court. In Minnesota, we also have another sort of what they call a dual jurisdiction program, which is extended jurisdiction juvenile programming, where they can serve a juvenile sentence and be on probation for a juvenile sentence until they're 25. And if they make it through that, then they have the juvenile conviction, but not the adult conviction. If they blow their probation before they're 25, then they could wind up serving an adult sentence on top of the juvenile probation that they had been on.
Is it a difficult process?
Well, it depends on the perspective, but we have, I think if you look at the numbers, and I did bring those here, but you know, we have a lot fewer kids going through certification in EJJ than we did. At the turn of the century, statewide there would be about 400 kids who were going through the certification or EJJ, and most of them were in the EJJ. I think it was 300 EJJ kids and 100 juvenile sentences. And the last year that I have numbers for here was 2010, and it looks like it was down to about 250. So I think we're using those somewhat less than we used to statewide, but maybe that just means that kids are being safer and not committing those kind of serious offenses that bring them into adult court.
Let's hope that's what that means. Okay? Hey, thanks, John. Appreciate you coming in and educating us about all the things that the county attorney does.
Well, and thanks for the invitation, Gordy.
And we'll have to discuss this, what we're going to do for topics next time.
I'll try to talk more later.
You maybe get a little more. You did so good. Maybe we can have some other guests come in too, you know, drug court, and there's all kinds of things we can delve into.
Yeah.
You know, obviously we can't get specific into cases, I'm guessing.
Right. But we can certainly give you the kind of public details and overview of what's going on, and so yeah, we can certainly talk about what you want to talk about next time.
Bottom line is we want to educate folks, and very informative. Thanks, John. Appreciate that very much. John Fossum, our guest today on AM Minnesota. We are still in search of a program for Monday. Mondays are hard days to book for some reason. Tuesday, Merlin players will be stopping by. Dave, let's see, we'll be at the Shepherd Center in their new location on Wednesday. Minnesota Ag Expo at Jerry on Thursday, and then we'll be at the CCS for Catholic Schools Week Friday of next week. You're in tune to KDHL.